al fin, por primera vez en todo el tiempo que he estado aquí, un día soleado.
Hoy vamos a visitar el club privado más importante de Nueva York, y para eso tenemos que cruzar Central Park hasta la calle 70 Este. Desde niño siempre había soñado con ser un aventurero y conocer todo el mundo, y no hay mejor lugar para encontrar personas con la misma orientación que el Club de los Exploradores. Fue fundado en 1905 por el historiador Henry Colin Walsh para unir a los exploradores con lazos de compañerismo y promover la exploración por todos los medios disponibles. El club consiguió éxito instantáneo. El 6 de abril de 1909, Robert Perry plantó la bandera del club en el Polo Norte, y menos de 3 años después, Roland Amundsen hizo lo propio en el Polo Sur. Charles Lindbergh llevaba la bandera consigo cuando fue el primero en volar a través del Atlántico en el Espíritu de San Luis, al igual que Sir Edmund Hillary, al ser el primero en escalar el monte Everest con su amigo Tenzin. En 1960, Jack Pickard fue el primer hombre en llegar al fondo del océano en Marianas Trench, y además lo hizo en un batiscafo diseñado por su padre, Auguste. Jack y Auguste ambos eran miembros del Club de los Exploradores. Y ahora, gracias a un buen amigo, tengo una cita para conocer su sede principal en Manhattan y presentar algunos proyectos propios en los que he estado trabajando.
Como les decía, es uno de los clubs más importantes de la ciudad de Nueva York, es exclusivo. Tienes que haber, la única forma en la que puedes entrar es si te recomienda un miembro. Les comento, la mayoría de los miembros son biólogos, aventureros que han estado en la Antártica, que han hecho alguna contribución importante en cuestión de especies, en cuestión de antropología, ya sea que hayan descubierto un lugar nuevo. Voy a tratar de grabar todo lo que me permitan, pero es un club privado, entonces puede que me dejen grabar un poco, puede que no me dejen grabar absolutamente nada.
Thor Heyerdahl, el explorador noruego que construyó una balsa de madera y zarpó de Perú hacia las islas Polinesias para mostrar que pudieron ser colonizadas por nativos de América, en su libro Kon-Tiki describe perfectamente al club. Nada indica que haya algo fuera de lo ordinario cruzando la puerta, salvo por una pequeña placa de metal. Pero al entrar, uno ha saltado en paracaídas a un mundo extraño, miles de millas lejos de las filas de autos rodeadas por rascacielos de Nueva York, tragado por una atmósfera de caza de leones y vida polar. Trofeos de hipopótamos y ciervos, grandes rifles, tambores de guerra y lanzas, carpas indias, ídolos y naves, banderas, fotografías y mapas rodean a los miembros del club cuando se reúnen para cenar o para escuchar conferencias sobre países lejanos. Fin de la cita. Todos los miembros tienen la posibilidad y el honor de llevar consigo la bandera del club en sus expediciones, siempre que sea posible demostrar su valor científico. Una vez que la expedición ha sido aprobada, se decidirá entre una bandera nueva o una que ha estado en lugares similares. También es posible solicitar la bandera que portó su ídolo o la de alguna expedición que lo haya inspirado. Todas las banderas están numeradas y se mantiene un registro puntual de los lugares en los que han estado. Cuando un miembro realiza una verdadera hazaña, la bandera que llevó en su expedición es retirada y exhibida.
So these are the retired flags. So that's the flag James Cameron took to the bottom of the Marianas Trench in about 2012, and it had previously been to the summit of Mount Everest 3 times. So
Yes.
it's the only object in human history to go to
To
the
be
highest
3
and
times,
lowest.
yes.
That's pretty cool, right?
I read that, absolutely.
On the right there is Kon-Tiki, which is the famous Thor Heyerdahl flag.
Mm-hmm.
He's the gentleman who floated across the Pacific Ocean on a raft he built out of balsa wood. And then the next one, if you want to get closer to that, those are all Apollo flags, Apollo moon flags.
They were.
Top right is Apollo 8. I'll show you right here.
Neil Armstrong is a
Neil Armstrong was a member.
member of the club, right?
So this is Apollo 8, which is one of the first orbits of the moon. First lunar orbit.
Uh-huh.
This is Apollo 15, which was actually a moonwalk. And then this is Apollo 13, which very famously Apollo 13, they didn't make it. If you ever see the movie with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
so
I read the letter as well.
Jim Lovell is the guy who was played by Tom Hanks. So this is they had it in a fire seal bag, and so they couldn't take it out of the bag because they were a little busy.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are all retired flags that go throughout the history of exploration.
These are the only retired flags?
No, there's more. These are just the ones that are hanging up.
The
There's
mo-
about 30 of them that are retired.
30.
Mhm.
Well, but all of these are pretty notorious,
Yeah,
right?
so this is for true polar north, so the first one where they went to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
This is first transarctic flights, so the first guys to fly across the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first solo of the North Pole,
Mm-hmm.
so the first guy who ever made the North Pole solo, whereas previously they had done it as a crew.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually really famous also because the explorer's name's Naomi Uemura. He's a really famous Japanese explorer. And so after he soloed the North Pole in the late 70s, he became very famous. And then he tried to solo Denali in the winter. The famous, used to call it Mount McKinley in the United States.
In the
which
winter?
is the tallest mountain in Alaska,
Uh-huh.
in the North America, I believe. And so it's still never been done. No one has summited it in the winter. And so when he attempted it, there was a big blizzard came through when he was at one of the higher base camps. And during a summit attempt, actually the storm came through and they never sent out a search party for him for about 2 days because they didn't want to invalidate his summit bid. Because if the search party goes and gets you, you don't get your summit accomplishment. So they intentionally didn't send out a search party because he was so famous as an individualistic explorer. And they never found his body. He's actually still on Denali somewhere in the crevasse there. So it's also sort of a cautionary tale in exploration. And then the two in the corner here, this is our first edition flags. We call them the Dellenbaugh flags. So that's the first design as they first iterated. And then this one right here is flag number 2, and that's Roy Chapman Andrews. And so he's the one who found all the dinosaur bones and the first dinosaur eggs over at the Museum of Natural History.
How many designs has the flag gone through?
So just this original red, and then you can see these two are
Uh-huh.
literally one of a kind,
Uh-huh.
and then it became what it is.
Okay.
And then other than that, it's just a material question. Over time, the materials have changed. Like you can see old cotton flags, but there's also vinyl flags as we got further along, and now they make them out of polymers and plastics.
Yeah.
The more extreme places our members have gone, the more crazy sort of flags material we have to
Yeah.
develop. One of our members, a guy named George Coronis, just got lowered into a volcano, so he needed a flag that was flame retardant. The tusks right here, this is from an expedition in 1922. The guy's name is Armand Dennis. And so it's actually one of only 2 in the world. It's a genetic anomaly. It's
Yeah.
like if you had 6 fingers.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
you're
yes.
a physician, so you know
Yeah,
much
yeah.
better than me. So we had the director of mammalogy from the Smithsonian here explaining to me it's an African forest elephant, and that's all tar and sap from the trees that they rub their tusks up against. They're not stained. That's natural stain. So these are all test panels from the Museum of Natural History. So if you're familiar, like this is the background of the gorilla diorama. So the gentleman who painted all our backgrounds, his name's William R. Lee. And so he couldn't paint on that sort of U-shaped 3D. So he painted these as test panels and then painted on the walls in the museum. And if you look along the horizon there's about 15 different types of animal species. You can see little zebras and little giraffes and stuff. But yeah, every single thing on the wall as we go up between these 2 floors are all original test panels for the Museum of Natural History.
You doing a tour?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's members, so no worries. So we call this the Roosevelt Office. So Teddy Roosevelt was a friend of the Clark family who originally owned the house. And so he slept here for 12 days in this room when he was a guest of the Clark family. And what Stuart is working on here, this table, is Teddy Roosevelt's board table. It actually sat in Sagamore Hill. If you guys are familiar, there's a house up on Long Island that used to belong to President Teddy Roosevelt called Sagamore Hill, which was his home. And when he was the president one summer, it was very hot in Washington, D.C., so they had to convene his cabinet up here in New York, and so they convened the cabinet for the whole summer around the table. So they planned a portion of the Panama Canal on the table, and they also laid the foundations for the Russo-Japanese Peace Treaty that he won the Nobel Peace Prize for a little later on. But now you can come in and hang out and eat lunch. So the far wall probably has some of the most famous stuff straight ahead of you guys. Right up top there, that's obviously Buzz Aldrin. And then to the left is Mike Massimino, who's a member of ours now, who comes here all the time and orders pizza and hangs out in the lobby. And then underneath him on the left there, that's Joe Kittinger, who's the first guy who jumped from the atmosphere. And then if you're familiar, Felix Baumgartner did it a little while,
Yes.
not too long ago in that big Red Bull suit. And then his record was broken by this guy who's a club member. His name's Alan Eustace, who used to be a vice president for Google. And so he went up in a custom designed hot air balloon that took him so high up in the atmosphere that the sky turns black. And he has to wear a spacesuit, and then he skydived all the way back down to Earth. And the skydive lasted for over 10 minutes. because he was that far up. Which tells you something. Imagine falling for 10 minutes straight.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and then these are the Titanic guys. So these are the guys that originally found the Titanic. Bob Ballard's a famous club member. Actually was just here last week. The cheetah itself was actually collected by Teddy Roosevelt in Africa. And that big U-shaped horn, you can see that big U-shaped horn at the back there. That's actually a woolly mammoth tusk.
Oh, yeah. Where's the...
Straight back.
Yeah, no.
That's a narwhal. That's a
and
narwhal
then,
horn.
the
Right?
other
You
thing
can see
that's
it.
interesting is...
Yeah, the phallus.
Yeah.
So everything in here has a crazy story.
We're all adults here.
Are you want me to tell a story then?
Kevin will tell us about this.
So the thing in front of the flag, the big phallic-looking object, actually is a giant penis. It is a foreskin of a sperm whale's penis. And so in Inuit cultures, it's very much like... In Inuit cultures, a lot of native cultures, they're sustenance hunters, so they make use of every part of the animal. And so it's actually honorific. So they mount the phallus and they give it to visiting dignitaries or other tribal chiefs. So one of our members actually had to say apologies. They couldn't make our annual dinner in the 50s. And as an apology that they couldn't make the event, they sent club headquarters a mounted foreskin of a sperm whale penis. And then you'd probably be interested in this as a historian. On the left, behind you guys, these are our folio books, so rare folio books. And those red bound books on the left there, those are first edition copies of the Description de l'Egypte, which was commissioned by Napoleon when they actually invaded Egypt.
Oh.
So if you're familiar, Napoleon invaded Egypt across the Mediterranean. That's actually when they found the Rosetta Stone. The British had a much better navy, so when they tried to sail it across the Mediterranean, they stole it from the French. But the books themselves, it was actually kind of considered the first scientific expedition in history. So they didn't even call them scientists at the time, they called them natural philosophers. And so they brought about 230 of their greatest natural philosophers to Egypt, and they produced about a 15-volume set of every single aspect of Egyptian culture, biology. It goes from what the dragonflies look like on the Nile River all the way to what the foods that the people ate, descriptions, recipes, amazing prints. Probably the coolest books I think we have in the whole house. What else we got? The gentleman on top of the fireplace there, his name's Peter Freud. He's a Danish explorer, probably the most famous Danish explorer. You see he's got a peg leg. His left leg's a peg leg. So he lost his leg in a crevasse accident when he was mapping Greenland. And then he went back about 3 years later and mapped the whole of Greenland with a peg leg. Not too bad if you can get it. And then that tiger there was commissioned by, one of our members was commissioned to actually kill the tiger because she had her jaw broken by a game animal. It actually kicked her in the jaw, as I was told. And there's a little story about her on the right in that little white square there if you want to read a little more. But so she actually ended up resorting to hunting humans, sort of like The Ghost in the Darkness, if you guys have ever seen that movie with the two lions. So she had killed over 40 people in a specific village in Africa, and our member was actually commissioned just to kill this specific tiger. Because as they say, she started to teach her young how to hunt humans as well. So we actually had the same gentleman I was talking to you about downstairs, the guy who's the director of mammalogy at the Smithsonian. Her skull was donated to us as well, and he was doing analysis on the skull, and he could actually see where the bone was broken, where it was kicked in by the hoof. So he even gave us some corroboration of the story. You never know in this place. You get a mixture of myth, history, self-inflation. You know how history works. So this is an Akeley original. So it's actually, if you were to get the whole house audited, we obviously don't sell anything. We're a cultural institution, so nothing is of value to us. But from an audit standpoint, that's probably the most valuable thing in the whole house. That's an actual black rhino. So they're perhaps the most closest to extinct mammal species on Earth. And that's Carl Akeley original. So the father of taxidermied that black rhino, which is now almost extinct. So the combination of those two things make it incredibly rare.
Kevin y yo nos quedamos hablando un poco sobre los libros. Me contó que en ocasiones viene un anticuario invitado y los leen en grupo. Pasé el resto de ese día en el archivo histórico del club, pero antes de eso, Kevin tenía una última cosa que mostrarme.
And so it really started, the romance of Egyptology. Like people sort of romanticize Egypt now.
Yeah,
That's sort of what kicked it all off.
Yes.
And so it created a huge influence on cuisine in Europe.
Yeah, I read.
It's all description of spices and what have you.
I'm familiar with this because I read Orientalism from
Ah,
Edward
yeah,
Said.
yeah.
So yeah, he says this is the main source of.
Exactly right. I read Said myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good book.
Yeah, to say the least. But yeah, pretty neat, right?
Speechless.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I'm really speechless.
Let me show you something real quick before we. I gotta run back downstairs, but there's one more thing I should show you
Yeah.
while we're up there. Just because you yourself are a historian.
Uh huh.
We call this the map room. So we were founded before satellites were created. So our members would actually come here and do their courses of where they were going. So you can see their slides and you can see the labels. US 1, US 2, US possessions, North America, Mexico, West Indies. And it's just folder after folder of topographical maps. And they're huge binder, huge amounts of just, original topographical maps.
Wow.
So as a member, you can come in if you ever want to do research. We have a topographical map of everywhere in the world. Like more maps than you could ever imagine. 5,000 plus maps. So we have a huge map resource, and these are all designed for mapping. So you can put them up here in the lights, give you a beautiful look. So we also have that as a resource if you're ever interested.
Do you have a library? Yeah.
I'll show you as we head downstairs.